When you stay fully committed to no contact and refuse to bend, beg, chase, or try to prove your worth, something powerful starts happening inside you long before anything happens externally. At first, it may feel like you're losing control, but over time, you realize that the real control was never about getting a response, getting them back, or changing someone's mind. It was always about taking ownership of your emotions and mastering the part of you that once reacted from fear. No contact becomes less about them and more about you stepping into emotional strength, because when someone pulls away, rejects you, or creates uncertainty, your reaction reveals your level of inner maturity. If you break no contact out of loneliness, panic, or desperation, you confirm that your emotions are leading you rather than you leading your emotions. But when you stand firm, patient, and detached, you immediately shift the power dynamic back to self respect, because confidence is always measured by how calm you remain in moments you can't control. You begin noticing that the anxiety slowly fades and clarity rises. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen?" you start thinking, "What does this teach me about myself?" Emotional control is built the same way strength is built in the gym. Resistance. Every time you resist the urge to reach out, check their profile, seek closure, explain yourself, or fix something that isn't ready to be fixed, you grow mentally stronger. You're training your emotional muscles to operate from value, not need. People who are emotionally dependent panic when connection is interrupted, while people who develop emotional stability trust that if something is truly meant, time can't destroy it. You stop operating from fear of losing someone and start operating from the belief that real connection never requires force. With time, inner calm returns and you begin to feel your identity again. You focus on yourself instead of the story your mind was creating around them. You start realizing that no person should hold the power to break your inner balance. When you stop trying to control what's uncertain, you gain control over what truly belongs to you, your thoughts, your energy, your actions, and your direction. And that's where personal power is reborn. Your silence becomes a declaration that your emotional state does not depend on another human being's approval, attention, or presence. When someone sees that you have the discipline to stay firm, it communicates confidence, self worth, and strength without a single word spoken. No contact isn't about punishing, ignoring, or manipulating. It's about returning to yourself and letting things unfold naturally instead of forcing outcomes. The person who can walk away peacefully is always more powerful than the one who needs constant reassurance, because real strength is not measured by how hard you hold on, but by how calmly you can let go while still believing you will be perfectly fine with or without them. When you remain silent and never break no contact, you create a space that forces the other person to sit with their own thoughts instead of your words. Human nature is wired to value what is no longer easily accessible, and when communication stops, the mind begins to search for meaning in that silence. People don't usually miss what they have constant access to. They miss what is suddenly gone, especially when it once held emotional value. When you stop reaching out, their brain no longer receives reassurance, attention, comfort, or ego validation from you, and that absence triggers curiosity long before it triggers regret. They begin to notice what is no longer available: your voice, your effort, your presence, your energy, and your emotional support. Silence becomes a silent mirror reflecting everything they once took for granted. At first, they may assume that your silence is temporary, that you're processing emotions or waiting for the right moment to return, because that's what most people do. But when the days turn into weeks and the weeks turn into real distance, curiosity begins to grow into deeper questions. Why haven't they tried to fix it? Did they move on? Or are they talking to someone else? Have they finally realized their worth? Silence forces introspection, because without messages, calls, or emotional updates, the mind is left to fill the gaps, and the unknown is always more powerful than the predictable. When someone can no longer read you, they can no longer control the narrative, and that creates a psychological pull that no words could ever achieve. Your silence also gives them the opportunity to evaluate the truth instead of reacting to your emotions. Sometimes, when communication is constant, people overlook the importance of what was shared, but when the noise disappears, memories become louder. The brain tends to romanticize what it can't access, and the longer you stay silent, the more value your presence gains. Not because you are trying to be mysterious, but because you're no longer feeding the emotional cycle that made you look available on demand. Curiosity creates emotional tension, And emotional tension is one of the strongest drivers of attraction, clarity, and realization. Over time, your silence becomes a quiet reminder that you are not waiting, chasing, or seeking validation. This shift creates a new narrative. You are no longer the person who fights for someone who isn't fighting for you. You are now the one who is strong enough to walk away, respect your boundaries, and allow space to reveal the truth. The mind begins to explore the possibility that you may actually be done, and that possibility alone can change how they perceive your value. In a world where most people beg to stay, the one who can walk away with dignity becomes unforgettable because silence always speaks the loudest when it comes from someone who once cared deeply. When someone pulls away and you don't break no contact, you automatically disrupt the old emotional patterns that once kept you stuck in a cycle of chasing, convincing, and proving. Many people fall in the trap of trying to fix a relationship through pressure, over communication, or emotional intensity, believing that effort alone will restore connection. But effort without mutual investment only highlights imbalance. When one person is constantly reaching and the other is constantly retreating, it creates a dynamic where value, interest, and emotional power appear uneven. The more you try to win back what is slipping away, the more you unknowingly communicate fear, fear of loss, fear of rejection, fear of not being enough. That fear is exactly what weakens attraction and respect in any romantic dynamic. When you commit to staying silent, you refuse to feed the old version of yourself, the one who tried to hold on through reassurance, persuasion, or emotional pressure. No contact interrupts that identity and forces you to rise into a more self respecting version of yourself. Instead of reacting, explaining, apologizing without purpose, or trying to rewrite history, you take a stand. If someone wants to stay, they will stay because they choose to, not because you chase them into it. This breaks the cycle of attachment anxiety and teaches you how to love from strength instead of fear. It shows that you would rather lose someone by respecting yourself than lose yourself by trying to keep someone. This shift holds psychological weight. When a person senses that you are not trying to force connection anymore, they may begin to see you differently. They may start to realize that your presence was never guaranteed and that your loyalty was never a weakness, it was a gift. The absence of pursuit removes emotional pressure and restores a sense of balance. Instead of being seen as someone who needs validation, you become someone who respects personal boundaries even when it hurts. That is emotional maturity, and maturity is far more attractive than desperation. Breaking the cycle of neediness isn't about pretending not to care or playing emotional games. It's about choosing emotional discipline over emotional reaction. It's about refusing to bargain with someone for attention or affection. It's about understanding that if a connection can only exist through constant chasing, it was never secure enough to last. Your silence becomes a declaration that you are rewriting your emotional script from someone who seeks approval to someone who honors self worth. And when you operate from value, you no longer ask, what can I do to make them stay? But instead, is this situation aligned with my dignity and peace? When you stop repeating unhealthy patterns, your energy changes, your mindset changes, and eventually your standards change. You don't attract what you want, you attract who you are, and breaking old habits is the moment you begin evolving into the version of yourself who refuses to beg for love, because real love never requires begging. When you stay in no contact without reaching out, chasing, or attempting to force clarity, you give reality the time and space it needs to reveal what was true and what was temporary. Most relationships don't fall apart because of a single argument or misunderstanding. They fall apart because something deeper needs to be understood, healed, or corrected, and pressure only delays that process. When you refuse to break no contact, you allow space for emotions to settle, for perspective to form, and for both people to see clearly without the fog of reactions, ego, or fear. Real connections don't dissolve when there is silence. They either strengthen through understanding or fade because they were never built on solid foundation. Distance is not the enemy of love. It is the test that reveals its authenticity. During no contact, something very important happens. Emotional chemistry resets. When communication stops, the nervous system finally gets a chance to calm down, especially if the relationship had become tense, confusing, or imbalanced. Without constant messages, arguments, long explanations, or emotional chasing, both people gain mental breathing room. And when emotions settle, logic becomes louder. A person who once focused only on what annoyed them may now remember what mattered. Someone who felt overwhelmed may begin to appreciate the peace they feel, but also notice the absence of your presence. And someone who didn't want commitment or clarity may finally begin to understand the weight of losing access to your energy, loyalty, or emotional value. The silence is where regret, appreciation, clarity, or detachment begins to form, and naturally, not forcefully. If the connection was meaningful, space allows desire to rebuild. If it wasn't, space prevents you from wasting more time. Either way, silence is a filter that separates emotional impulse from emotional truth. No contact is not about hoping they return. It's about trusting that what is real stays and what is weak falls away. You are no longer trying to win love through effort. You are letting compatibility, maturity, and timing decide the outcome. When someone genuinely cares, they eventually step forward with respect, clarity, and willingness. When they do not, they slowly drift, and you recognize it's not your job to convince someone of your worth. Space also gives you time to notice red flags you once ignored. When you are not emotionally entangled, your intuition sharpens. You begin to see patterns, behaviors, or dynamics that were unhealthy. You might realize that you deserve more effort, deeper connection, and better communication than you previously accepted. And if they return, you will not return the same. You will return with boundaries, awareness, and standards, not need or desperation. If they do not return, you walk forward with dignity rather than feeling like you lost yourself trying to hold on. Silence reveals which relationships were built on emotional foundation and which were held together by comfort, attachment, or fear of loneliness, and truth is always revealed when pressure is removed. When you commit to no contact and direct your focus back toward yourself, you begin to understand how powerful your attention truly is. Most people don't realize how much emotional, mental, and physical energy they pour into worrying about another person until that energy stops flowing outward. When communication ends, your mind may try to return to old habits, checking their social media, replaying memories, wondering what they are thinking, or hoping for a sign. But over time, you realize that those habits never created peace, they only fed attachment. When you stay disciplined, the emotional space that feels empty at first slowly becomes a foundation for rebuilding your identity, your confidence, and your personal goals. Instead of investing in uncertainty, you start investing in yourself. And that shift is where transformation begins. You start seeing yourself not through the lens of rejection or heartbreak, but through the lens of potential. And potential grows when attention is redirected inward. When you finally stop trying to fix someone else, you start fixing the areas of your life that will always matter: your purpose, your mindset, your financial growth, your confidence, your health, and your emotional well being. You begin to understand that romantic relationships are only one part of your life, not the center of it. When your identity is built on purpose instead of connection, no breakup or separation has the power to break you. You become someone who stands strong because your happiness is no longer attached to another person's presence, effort, or validation. This is where the real magic happens. You start evolving into someone you can genuinely respect. You rebuild routines, redefine goals, and raise standards. You learn to enjoy your own space rather than fear it. You start valuing progress over attention and healing over attachment. Growth becomes your priority, and you develop a version of yourself that is stronger, wiser, calmer, and more attractive than before. You are no longer living in the past or waiting for the future. You are actively building a life that aligns with who you want to become. Instead of asking, will they come back? You start asking, how can I become the best version of myself, whether they return or not? During this period of growth, people around you may notice your changes even before the person you once focused on does. You carry yourself differently, speak differently, and think differently. Your perspective shifts from emotional dependence to emotional intelligence, and if they ever return, you will respond from clarity rather than fear. You will choose what serves your peace instead of clinging to what hurt you. When you grow, you stop tolerating confusion, inconsistency, or half hearted effort because growth teaches you what real self respect feels like. That is what makes no contact more than just silence. It becomes a commitment to evolve, not for someone else, but for the person you are becoming. When you stay committed to no contact and refuse to reach out, you begin shifting from a mindset of chasing to a mindset of choosing. You no longer see yourself as someone trying to win another person's approval. Instead, you recognize that your value does not depend on being accepted, responded to, or validated by anyone. This silence sends one clear message: You know your worth, and you are not afraid to walk alone if the treatment you desire is not honestly offered. When you don't break no contact, you reveal that your life is not built around one person. It is built around purpose, standards, peace, and self respect. You are no longer driven by fear of losing someone. You are driven by the belief that anyone who truly belongs in your life will show up with effort, not excuses. This shift is powerful because most people believe value can be proven externally through effort, gifts, long conversations, or emotional convincing, but true value is shown through what you will not tolerate. When you stay silent, you demonstrate that you will not participate in a dynamic where you must beg for clarity or compete for attention. You reveal that the door to your life is not locked, but it will only open for someone who knocks with consistency, respect, and genuine emotional maturity. You are no longer the pursuer, you are the one who allows others to prove whether they deserve a place in your life. This is what positions you as the prize, not because you're trying to look superior, but because you know that love should never feel like a negotiation. Over time, you begin to carry yourself with quiet confidence. You realize that attraction is not built through chasing or trying to impress someone, but through being someone who is fulfilled from within. No contact teaches you that real value is displayed through behavior, not words. Anyone can say they care, but only those with genuine intent take action without being pushed. When you stay silent, you filter out those who are only attached to comfort, attention, or convenience. The ones who truly cared will feel your absence and respond with sincerity. The ones who were never serious will simply fade away, and that is a blessing, not a loss. Being the prize is not about ego. It is about recognizing your emotional currency. It's understanding that your energy has weight, your love has value, your presence has impact, and your time is not something you give away freely. When you no longer break no contact, you show that love is not something you chase. It is something you attract by being aligned, confident, healed, and intentional. You become someone who understands that if a bond is real, it will reconnect naturally. And if it isn't, silence will protect your dignity and your future.